All right, we've got some work to do. I think we're on time as far as we can to get started. I want to start with a question for you, okay? I want you to kind of think introspectively for a little bit. How much faith do you have? If you were to put that on a scale, and we could put a scale on the screen for you to see, 1 being really low, very little faith, 10 being high. How much faith do you have? Give yourself a number. 1 would be this idea of I believe in a higher power. I believe that there's a God. Okay, I can take that simple step. 10 is I trust God fully. I believe His word. I surrender daily. I don't ever doubt or worry. Nobody in the room is probably a 10. Okay, some of us, you find yourself, just come up with your number. And I'm not going to ask you to share that number. I'm not going to ask you to compare it to the person 2 rows behind you or in front of you. I just want you to have your number in your head because I think it's going to be helpful. Then I want to think about this idea of evangelism. Have you heard that term before? Evangelism becomes this idea of sharing good news, being light, blessing people around you. If you read the Bible, especially if you're new to it, you'll certainly quickly realize there's 2 parts of the Bible. There's what we call the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament works through this up and down history of the people of Israel and points us toward the coming of Christ. Christ is the beginning of the New Testament. The Gospels tell the stories of Christ, and then it tells the story of how the church grows out of that movement kind of outward. Now, this up and down nation of Israel is a really interesting place to start because they found themselves being part of God's story. They were kind of caught up in it. And that created all kinds of problems for them because they didn't exactly know why they were doing what they were doing. And they had come up with different ideas about why God had maybe chosen them. And so here's a verse from Deuteronomy 4. This is kind of the pretext of where we're going to get to today. This is the instruction that God gives the people of Israel. It's the chapter right before the 10 Commandments are given. It says, observe them, the law, carefully, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to who? The nations. So your neighbors, the people around you. So here at Christ Community Church, we have this idea that we are guiding our neighbors to a hope-filled future. How do we share our faith? Well, by living out our faith, by being obedient to what God calls us to do. Now, picture in your head, if you can, a map of the world. Can you picture Europe? I'm not going to ask you to name the countries because we would fail miserably, right? Okay? And then can you picture how that relates to where Asia is? And can you picture where Africa is on this map in your head? Great. Where is Israel on that map? Right in the middle. Is Israel Asia? Is Israel Africa? Is Israel Europe? No, if you were to design the perfect place for God to plant His people to be a witness to their neighbors, it would be there. And interestingly enough, if you were to plant the perfect place to be a witness to North America, I think Chicago is a pretty good place, isn't it? It's where East and West come together, where North and South meet. We have to get around this land bridge. We got to use that to get around the lakes. It's interesting, right, that God has used places and people at certain places. Evangelism is an outcome of biblical obedience. So Israel, for a time, heard that they were God's chosen people. When you're God's chosen people, you start to kind of puff out your chest a little bit, walk with a little bit of a swagger, and they start to think that they're better than other people. To which God reminds them, you're not. Deuteronomy chapter 7, just a couple of chapters later, says, the Lord did not set His affection on you and choose you because you were more numerous than all the other peoples, for you were actually the fewest of all peoples. But it was because God loved you and kept the oath He swore to your ancestors. So why did God choose Israel? Because God chose Israel. Why did He love them? Because He made a commitment to Abraham, their forefather, long before. There was nothing else special about them, not the color of their skin, not the money in their back pocket, not their height, not their intellect. They were just chosen. Why? To be a witness to those around them. That's the point. Now, often, this verse reminds us that God used small things to teach big lessons. This story is one of my favorite Old Testament stories, often overlooked. I think I preached on this before, but in a different way. I want to take you to the story of Naaman, to tell the story of a little person with a big impact. Here we go. 2 Kings chapter 5 is our text for today. We're going to work through this story kind of chunk by chunk. It starts with this background. It says, now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. So let me just walk through our main character in the story today. His name is Naaman. Here's a couple bullet points about him. He's the commander of Aram's army. Aram is not Israel. Aram is not Judah. Aram is a foreign nation. It would be modern-day Syria, Damascus area, okay? He is strong. He is battle-tested. He is highly regarded by his boss, which is the king. He is connected. He is successful. Oh, there's one more detail. He's a leper. He lives with a skin condition that will slowly eliminate blood flow, feeling, loss of limbs, amputation, and ultimately death. He has a terminal disease that everybody around him can see. Naaman is a reminder that even the strongest, most successful people can have big problems. Have you ever known somebody really strong and successful with a big problem? Just watch the news for a little while, right? The princess has cancer. The star athlete goes bankrupt. The celebrity's got a drinking problem. The comedian lives with depression. Everyone's got problems, right? What do we do with our problems? Verse 2. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and taken captive a young girl from Israel. And she served Naaman's wife. Can you connect the relationship here? So this is a refugee slave girl, a victim of war, okay? She, young girl, says to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who's in Samaria," which is central Israel, "he would cure him of his leprosy." Now, this is incredible storytelling by God, and we're 3 verses in, okay? So Naaman, powerful leader, fights battle, kills enemies, takes prisoners. And who's advising this powerful man? A little slave girl. Pretty cool, right? Now, this little slave girl is so faithfully raised by her Jewish parents that she knows there is a God. There is a God who calls me to love my enemies. There is a God who has the power to heal. And if you knew this God, you could have access to this healing. She's an evangelist. She's doing what Deuteronomy chapter 4 said, "Obey the law so faithfully that your neighbors hear about it." Now, Samaria, I said before, is central Israel. Naaman has been sending armies, bands, groups of raiders to come and take people from those places. So Naaman doesn't have a lot of friends in Israel. And to get to Samaria, he has to go through a lot of places where he's not exactly liked. And he also happens to be a commander of an army of a bunch of pagan people who don't believe in their God. But he is so desperate that he gives it a shot. So we get to verse 4. Naaman went to his master. Who's Naaman's master? The king. Naaman's master, he's the commander of the king's army, therefore his master's the king. He went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means, go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you, that you may cure him of his leprosy." As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send me someone to be cured of his leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me." The king freaks out. The king of Israel freaks out that the king of Aram sent him a letter because he knows he can't heal him. This is a trick. This is a ploy. You're trying to set me up to fail you so that you can take even more from my people and my country. And Naaman shows up. Did you notice what Naaman comes with? Money? Nice clothes, chariots, horses. He's fully loaded, right? But here's the problem. Can new clothes cure you of leprosy? Can money cure you of leprosy? Can a magic potion? I don't know if you've ever faced something in your life that is incurable or impossible to change, a disability you can't fix or heal. Here's an equivalent to what this story would be. Imagine calling your U.S. senator and saying to them, I heard that there's a special procedure that it can be done for me in Iran. And would you write letters so that I could go to Tehran and get safe passage there to meet with a special doctor there? Would you do it? There's no chance, right? But that's how desperate he is in this story. Everyone's disturbed by this. Naaman, his wife's servant, the king of Israel. No one has a clue what to do. Verse 8. When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know there's a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and his chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Important detail here coming up. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, go, wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed. But Naaman went away angry and said, I thought that surely he would come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot, and cure me of leprosy. Are not Abana and Parpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned and went off in rage. Let me connect the details in case you missed it. Elisha, the prophet of God that the girl was talking about, hears about the man, hears about the affliction, send him to me. When the guy comes and knocks on the door, Elisha doesn't get out of the back room. He sends his servant up to give the message. Naaman's not used to this. He's a man of power and influence. He demands to meet with those who are in authority. Elisha's thrown 2 curveballs. Curveball number 1, he sends the prescription through a messenger. Curveball number 2, the prescription is shockingly simple. Wash 7 times in the Jordan River. Naaman's hot. He's bothered. He's annoyed. He expected a magic potion, a miracle, a holy touch. Don't you think Naaman already tried a special rinse, a local cream, a medical expert? He traveled all this far. And here's the insight for you. I just want you to hold on to this, especially if you know somebody who's struggling in life right now. Hope is really dangerous. Hope is dangerous because when you get your hopes up and they crash back down to earth, people around you feel the earthquake. And there are very few things in life more miserable than being hopeless. And if you've walked with somebody who's gone through hard times, and they've tried this, they've tried coming to church, they've tried going to this specialist, they've tried going to see a therapist, and it's just not working, and it comes crashing down to life, they feel hopeless. Once again in this story, it's Naaman's servants who come to rescue him. Verse 13. Naaman's servants went to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, like spend the 6,000 shekels of gold, would you have not done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? And we can picture this. So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him. He gets a face-to-face this time and said, now I know there is no God in all the world except in Israel. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Come back with me to that scale I asked you about at the beginning of the text. How much faith does Naaman have at the beginning of the story? Like 0.5, right? I believe there might be a God. Maybe. But really, I have more faith in this little girl, and I'm so desperate, I'll give that a chance. But what he really believes in is power. He shows up with an army. Influence, he shows up with a letter. Elitism, he demands a face-to-face connection. Naaman's believing in all the things that we as humans tend to believe in. Our abilities. And what Elisha does, by being in the back room, by giving them a simple instruction, through God's, I think, guidance in this, is invites him to let go of his pride. And that's often the hardest thing, right? Giving in. Spiritual transformation, I'll say this till I'm done preaching, ever. Spiritual transformation starts with surrender and grows in belief. And belief often looks like actions of obedience. I can't save myself. I can't make everything right. I can't fix this. I can't control the future. I can't outlive my limits. I can't change my past. I can't is a perfect place to start. I think there's 3 reasonable outcomes for a person who would describe themselves as an atheist. If you say that you're an atheist, and if you're here, you're welcome here. We're glad you're here considering this with us today. If you're an atheist, it seems to me it's probably going to be one of 3 outcomes. Number 1, you're going to go insane. You're going to go insane because you're going to spend your life trying to control everything, your life, your future, the world around you. You're going to believe that you're in charge of your own destiny, but that's going to drive you mad because it's not true. You can't be in charge of your own destiny. Path 2, if you're an atheist, is despair. You've tried that. You've realized you can't do it, so therefore there is no meaning in life. There is no God. There is no higher power. There is no purpose. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. There's no hope. You will live and die, and none of it actually matters. You will drive yourself sad. Path 3 is you will become a hypocrite. And the reason for that is this. You will believe that there is meaning and purpose in life, that life can have love and significance, but you will have no reason to determine which of those things you follow compared to the people around you. And you will argue that your way is right and their way is wrong, but there's no empirical evidence for any of that, because in this world, according to what you don't believe, you are nothing more than a cosmic accident. And those things are just your preferences. You have no morals to live by. They're any better or worse than anybody else's. We're just fighting for what's ours, even though we'll never have it or own it. You have no foundation. All of those ways are actually quite depressing, aren't they? If your options are to become insane, despair, or become hypocritical, what do? At least in the despair group of people, they're telling the truth. On your own, there is no hope. Let me be very clear. There is no hope on your own. Because all of us are powerless against the greatest forces against us in life, like death and disease and disability. I can't is a true statement. I can't. On the first day of your life, you can't. Get out of the bed. Change yourself. Feed yourself. And it's quite likely for most of us on the last day of our life, I can't get out of bed, change myself, or feed myself. I can't. But God can. That's the gospel. I can't, but God can. I've made mistakes. I'm not very smart. I'm weak. I'm not very special. All of those things are something that many of you in this room feel often, if not right now. I can't. I've made mistakes, but God forgives sins. I'm not very special, but God's ways are higher than my ways. I'm quite weak, but Christ can do all things through him who strengthens me. I'm not very special, but still God chooses to love me and call me to be with him. I'm not very smart, but God's ways are higher than my ways. I messed up the order, my fault. And if you don't know if that's true, just come back through the pages of the Bible from beginning to end. Let me make this clear to you. Jacob was a cheater. Peter had a temper. David had an affair. Noah got drunk. Jonah ran away from God. Paul was a murderer. Gideon was insecure. Miriam was a gossip. Martha was a worrier. Thomas was a doubter. Sarah was impatient. Elijah was depressed. Moses stuttered. Zacchaeus was short. Not that there's anything wrong with being short. It's a quote. It's not mine. Abraham was old. Lazarus was dead. God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. Every Bible story starts with human incompetence. Anybody in this room incompetent? We all are. That's great news. I can't, but God can. Let's actually walk through Naaman's journey toward faith, because I think this is how actually other people will come to faith. Annie's story is a great testimony about that, right? It starts by we come. We just show up. So what does Naaman do in this story? He comes, not to Samaria, actually. First place he goes is to the palace. He's trying. He's asking the question. He's trying to figure it out. And then he finally comes to his own understanding of his weaknesses, his limits. Fine, I'll dip in the river if that's what it takes. I'll humble myself. And when your life starts to change, and often that change is gradual, he comes to believe. Far too many of the times when we're in a relationship with somebody else and we want to share our faith with them, we are wildly impatient. Okay? We need to give the people in our life patience. Just come with me. Let's pray together one time. Let's have a conversation about God. Tell me your story. What do you believe in? Just invite them to that, and then maybe they'll come too, and what's working and what's not working, and where is God showing up? And then eventually maybe you'll come to belief. I think God is waiting for many people to finally just let go, to admit that they can't, but God can. I want to end with a funny story from the book. If you read it, you've already heard it. I'll summarize it for the rest of us. It's about a woman who grew up with two different faiths. One of her parents was Jewish and the other parent was Catholic. And so some weekend she'd get taken to the synagogue. And the next weekend the other parent would take her to the Catholic church and force her to pray the rosary and ask for forgiveness for going to the synagogue. And so you can imagine what it feels like to be a kid like this who grows up with this division within your family, within your soul. And so she's confused and hurt and eventually wants nothing to do with God or religion. So she's like that atheist I talked about. Alcohol for her became a substitute God when she was a teenager. She started experimenting and then kind of got addicted to it. And after a decade of blackouts and lost jobs and 5 failed marriages and suicidal despair, it became apparent to her that she was nearing the end of a life that was unmanageable. And so she turned her life over to what AA calls is a higher power. But she refused to call this higher power God because of her past. That was off the table. So she named her higher power Ralph, which is great. And she believes in Ralph, that she needs Ralph to help her stay sober, but she doesn't want to believe in God, and she doesn't want to submit to what the Bible says about who God is. But her sobriety's not going really well, and she's really struggling to keep it together, and life continues to kind of fall apart, but she's not getting drunk as much, but she's still really struggling. Then one day she goes to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and there they are in the room, and there's a person in the room who's sick, literally sick and throwing up, and a person who stinks, and they're actively drunk. And she's really annoyed by this person, and they're going around the room, and when it comes to this person, he says, "I'm an alcoholic and my name is Ralph." And at that moment, God got her attention. And she said, "That's not my God. That's not my higher power." And she courageously began to let go and began to pray a simple prayer: "God, if you are real, make yourself known to me." And over the next few years, this woman began to encounter the living God who changed her life, who helped her achieve not just sobriety, but new life. Now, I wonder what your Ralph is. What's the thing that you don't want to give up and you're struggling to let go of? Who are you like in the story we just read about? Are you like Naaman? You're wildly successful in so many parts of your life, but there's this one thing that you just can't quite fix, can't quite shake. Are you humble enough to surrender that? Are you willing to let go? Are you maybe like the little slave girl who doesn't actually feel like you have much importance or power in this world? And yet, there's people in your sphere of influence who are asking really big questions. And you might have the opportunity to look at them and love them and say, would you be interested in hearing about God? Could I tell you about the God who's changed my life? Could I tell you about what my parents taught me when I was a little kid? Could I share my faith with you? If there's anything that you take away from today, I hope it's a simple phrase. I can't, but God can. I can't, but God can. As you run into the limits of your life, the painful hardships that we go through in this life, I hope that you would hold on to that truth. I can't, but God can. May you live in that gospel truth. Allow me to pray for you.